I decided to make a quick little tutorial just kind of showing how to get started programming with Visual Studio Code and getting set up with Monogame under Linux. I've done this before with Ubuntu, and I'm using a Cinnamon Mint right now, which is Ubuntu based. The first thing we'll do is do a search for Visual Studio Code, which is kind of a lightweight version of Visual Studio. In essence, it's classed as a code editor more than an IDE. You could actually use other code editors such as MonoDevelop, which I've actually used successfully with Ubuntu before. I think right now for the new version of Monogame there aren't any templates, so you'll have to grab your libraries and put them in the corresponding binary folder and then set up references for those. I'm going to use Visual Studio Code this time. So you can download and install the .deb file. After that, you can go into your folder and go into downloads if that's where you put it, and just double click the DEB file. I already installed mine and I already deleted the DEB file. After you install it, you can drag the link onto desktop. Next we'll go with getting Monogame. Actually no, first we'll go into Visual Studio. Now I've already got some of this stuff set up. If you go to the left hand panel here, if you're not familiar with Visual Studio Code already, you got your Explorer, which is kind of like a Solutions Explorer, and Search, and down here you got extensions which you can search for, and it'll look for them online, and you can add those as you need them. Now you may not need all of these, but a lot of them will make things a lot easier for you, so it functions a little more like the regular Visual Studio. So I got auto using for C#. You'll want C# for Visual Studio Code powered by OmniSharp. C# Essentials should be pretty handy. Got some C# extensions here. Snippets. I think some of these might have come with something that I downloaded all at once. C# XML documentation. I think a lot of these came with Essentials, I'm not sure. You should probably look up Material Icon Theme. It's not, you don't need to, but it'll make it so that you got some better icons in here, and it makes it kind of easier to just realize what you're looking at a glance. Looks like I got Monogame Content Builder. We'll get to that later. We got Microsoft Build Project Tools. If you go to build something, if you don't have this already, it might ask you about installing it, and then you just click yes. You'll want the NuGet Package Manager. This you don't really need. This you don't really need. I think this might have been installed already. I think there's just a few that I grabbed. Was auto using, this, and Essentials, which I think gave me these, and then Material Icon Theme. And we'll get to the Monogame Content Builder stuff after. And I think it asked me if I want to install this, and then I said yes. And then NuGet Package Manager, and I think that's all you really need. I usually keep settings open here so I can just switch stuff as I want. For example, if I go Code Lens, I can check here, and then here we can see reference information if we want. And if you don't want these, they're kind of causing everything to be spaced out more than you'd like. At any point, if you got settings always open, you can just go over here and uncheck it or check it again. So for setting up Monogame, we'll just type in Monogame, monogame.net, and at this time Monogame 3.8 is out. So we'll go to Monogame 3.8, and you can click on the Getting Started guide. We're under Ubuntu right now. So what you'll want to do first, if you haven't already done it, this is instructions for setting up .NET SDK. So you can copy that sort of thing, open up your terminal, and if you're not already familiar with Linux, this is kind of how you install a lot of stuff. This is through commands. So we'll do that command, and then you do this one, and I think you get the idea. And you want these packages. In my case, I'm only targeting Linux. I wouldn't install these, but it doesn't hurt if you do. And if you do install them, you can target platforms like Android. So kind of one at a time, just add these. I think you might be able to do them all at once, I'm not sure. And then finally that. And that's for Mono, which is needed for doing Android. Okay, so right now you probably already have Visual Studio Code installed. If you don't, we can do this. Or if you just want to be safe, you can go ahead and just enter these commands anyway, even if you did already install it. Do this update thing, And we'll need to install, oh yeah, this installs code. So we might want to do these anyway. We already did this essentially by double clicking that DEB file. And then we'll want to do this, install extension, .NET tools.c#, if we haven't already added that extension. If we did, it won't hurt if it tries to do it again. Next, for the templates. So like I said before, if you're using a different IDE or code editor, you'll have to get the libraries, the appropriate libraries, based on what you're trying to build, and place them where they need to be, and then add references. And the references would be added to your, let's see here, your references would be added to your CS proj. So you may need to look up how to add references to this, and there should be some pretty good guidance on how to do that. Just remember to avoid any spaces. If there's spaces, you may need to rename certain things. And I'm talking about in the file path. By the way, if you like, you can actually do this. You don't have to do this in here. You can actually do this here in Visual Studio Code. Go into the terminal thingy down here and paste your command here and hit enter. And that should allow you to install all the templates. Doing the same thing or using the regular command line interface, you can install the Monogame content builder, which you run as a separate tool. So you'll have to locate that and run it. And so it'll be acting as another program that you can use to set up your content. Earlier in Ubuntu, when I used this, it didn't do anything, but everything still worked, so maybe don't worry about that. But this time when I did it, it actually did do something. To create effects, we'll need to use Wine, because the effect builder is made to run under Windows. So you'll have to make sure to install Wine. And then we got this one here, creates a Wine prefix. Let's go to creating a new project. So what I did was in my home, I added a VS Code projects folder and a couple little test projects here. Linux game is the one we're going to be working on. So I added this folder, Linux game. And then in here, we navigate to the VS Code projects Linux game folder. See, like I can go like this. I'm sure you probably already know this stuff. As you can see here, we want to run .NET new, and then whatever template ID, -o, project name, whatever you want to call it, basically. If you use .NET new -l, so maybe you want to do that first. I'll just paste that here. If you do that, let's just move this up here, you get a list of all the templates. We're interested in these monogame templates. If you're making an Android application, you'd use this. We're going to use MG Desktop GL, which is like Monogame Desktop OpenGL. If you're following along and using a Mac, you can use MG iOS. Alright, so pull this back down. For what we want to do, we can just copy this and then go in here, and we got Monogame Desktop GL, like we said before, and then whatever you want to call your game. So I'm using the folder directory, which was the name of the project, so I'm just calling it Linux game, and then hit enter, and that will start a new project. And you should end up with something like this. If you click on Explorer, you should end up with something like this. Content should be relatively empty. So you got your main file here, your games icon, you can change that. Your CS proj, which you can add references to other things, but we don't need to do that because everything's set up already. For example, we got these down here. This we probably won't ever touch. That just kind of gets it started. So let's go to game one. I've already modified this a bit so that I just have these reminder titles over top of everything, so it's a bit easier to identify quickly. So in Visual Studio Code, you could usually go in here and double click Content, Monogame Content Builder, and it would automatically open the corresponding file to run this. In this case, we just run it as a separate file, so we got to find the Monogame Content Builder and then run it. So to do that, I just click here and type in MG, and we should get MGCB editor, and click on that. We'll just keep this open where we can start a new project and add our contents, graphics, sound effects and stuff, and effects files, and build them here. The effects files themselves might need to be built separately, or you could build them in Windows and bring it over and add them as XMBs to be copied. I'm going to attempt though to use Wine and build them here, although I haven't done it before, so we'll see how that works out. I paused it for just a moment there, and I just made a couple of modifications. I took the underscore off of graphics and sprite batch up here as well as down here. Every time before you try to run or debug or anything, always make sure you save it first. And the reason I say that is because I found previously that if you don't save it, it's not going to automatically save it unless you modify the settings. You can probably search for the settings in here. Like for example, I can type in pair as I did earlier, and I can edit the settings for bracket pairs in the editor. You might notice I did the same thing for the line numbers. Since I don't think I need them, I'll probably turn the line numbers back on though for when I'm trying to debug effects files. So let's go ahead and build this simple example and make sure it works first. I'm just going to click on Start Debugging. If you get any little pop-ups that you need certain things, you just click on Yes and it should install them. Okay, so that works. And I can hit Escape because we got this here. Alright, next we'll try to load in a background. I used a graphics program called Krita, which actually works pretty good. I'm finding I can do pretty much anything I could do in Photoshop I can do in Krita. I started off with a photo. I used some stamp brushes over here. I set up a favorites folder for different types of brushes that I use a lot, and then you can just click on here. Let's go with favorites. And you can quickly switch to whichever your favorite brush is. If you are using Krita and you're used to Photoshop, there's certain things you might be looking for, like burn and dodge and smudge and things like that. Those can actually be found in your brushes. So if you go into all and you can add them to a tag, you have to create a tag first. So you just look for a brush that's described like this one is a Blender Smear. So you can then right click on that and assign it to whichever category. I put it in my favorites, which is created with a tag here. So I just called it my favorites. A lot of the tools you'll find in here are actually hidden inside the brushes. If you'd like to use something that's a little closer to Photoshop, I know a lot of people are suggesting to just look for Pixlr on the internet. You just type that in and go into the website, and it's free unless you use the AI options, which you pay a little bit extra for those. We can start a photo editing project here and create a new one. I'll click on create because we're not going to use those templates. And see, you got like right here, you got blur, sharpen, you got your clone brush. So it's laid out in a way that's more familiar if you're more used to Photoshop. You got your adjustment layers, filters, so on and so forth. Very much like Photoshop. And then when you're done, you can download the image. You save it here and then download it after. So I've never actually used this one. I've just watched people use it. I probably will use it since I'm in Linux and I'm more familiar with Photoshop. But right now I'm finding I actually really like Krita. It's just a matter of figuring out where to find everything, and it's a little bit different on how to get into the different options. And over here too, you got your stabilizer if you need to do some smooth inking or something like that. I can shift drag to make this smaller. And you can hold control in Photoshop, it's Alt, to pick a color at any point. If you find your brush doesn't seem to be working, just make sure you got the right brush selected. I had smudge selected there for a moment. And with the stabilizer, as you can see, it allows you to draw smoother lines. If we wanted to go really smooth, we could go with the pen tool. I already saved this as a PNG, and I'm going to drop it in my content folder, and then I'll unpause this and I'll be back in a second. We'll add it to content after, and then we'll try it out as a background. But before I do that, let's get an image size that matches our resolution that we chose. Alright, so I'm going to go into Linux Game and into content and just drop it in here. Keep in mind, if you have XNBs that you're dropping in here, there's two ways you can do that. You can either go ahead and drop them in the appropriate bin in the appropriate place in there, or what I'd recommend doing, just so they're all in the same folder, is just put in the XNBs in your regular folder here. In my case, we're actually going to create the XNB on Linux itself instead of Windows. But if you do that, you'll want to set that file to copy using the Monogame Content Builder. Let's open up the Monogame Content Builder. So we're using this file. We don't have to start a new project. Let us click on this and right-click and go Add Existing Item in this case. If you left it in the original folder, you could also click existing item and then just go find it and tell it that you want to copy it to the local folder. So I'll just click there. Now we have forest far BG as something we can load with content. Let's go ahead and try that out. First of all, I'm going to quickly set up graphics so it's set up the way I want it. Quick explanation of what I did here. I'm not using a depth stencil format because I'm going to apply that to my target buffer, and then that'll be stretched over the screen onto the final buffer, the back buffer. So all the depth stuff will be on that other buffer that we're going to make after. And then here we just put the width and the height that we'd like the resolution to be. And always remember to use apply changes. You may notice too that I'm doing this in initialize. And we'll put this in initialize also. We'll go into load and load some content using, but first we've got to put the texture up here that we want. So I'm going to say texture 2D far background. And then down on load I can say far background is equal to content load texture 2D type. And then I just got to check my content builder to figure out what I actually called it because I forget. Here it is, forest far BG. We don't need the PNG. Forest far BG. Now, since it's going to fill the entire background, we don't need to clear the back buffer, so I'll just comment that out. If you wanted a black background, you'd normally set this to color.transparent. Oh yeah, one other thing. I like to do this. Graphics device. Since we do everything with graphics device, instead of saying graphics device dot, I'd like to assign GPU to equal graphics device. So I'll do that. Yeah, I guess it doesn't matter if I do it here or here. So we'll go here. We'll say GPU is equal to graphics device. And then here I can just type GPU. So if I wanted to clear, I could say GPU.clear instead of graphics device.clear, because normally you'd have to type that. Alright, so you do a sprite batch begin. Just a simple one for now. We can make it opaque because it's the farthest layer, but blend state opaque. Let's see, do we need to set sampler state, depth stencil state? Not really. Not for this example anyway. Let's draw our far background at 0, 0. So normally you'd say new vector to 0, 0. I'm just going to say vector 2.0, which is the same thing. Oh yeah, color.light. That just tells it that all channels are 100% for your RGB and alpha. I'll hit F5, and there we have it. So what I'd like to do is actually make this window the same size as the desktop resolution, and then have a target that I draw this on that will stretch out to that resolution. So it's still in windowed mode. Alternatively, if you wanted, and if you needed depth, for example, we could change the depth format here and not use an intermediate texture and just go like this. And you can feel free to do this if you like, to do this instead. Is full screen is true. Anytime you change any of the settings, make sure you use graphics.apply changes. I'm going to leave it in windowed mode though. We'll go up here and just quickly add a texture 2D main target. Then in either initialize or load, I can create a render target, which will act like a texture. Oh yeah, this should actually be a render target. 2D. We'll use GPU's graphics device. The width is going to be the width we actually want to use for resolution. We're not going to need maps because we're not doing any kind of 3D stuff that's going to require texture smoothing in the distance. They're false. Surface format .color. Here, if we wanted to include a depth format, if we're doing 3D, the modern 3D stuff, we pretty much always use depth 24. If we need the stencil, we'd use this one. Depth 16, sometimes you'll see some artifacts. For now, I'm just going to say depth format none. Although I'm not sure, I might want to do some 3D stuff. It wouldn't hurt to set it as depth 24 early. I'm not doing any multi-sampling. Render target usage, dot, discard contents in this case. Shared is false. I don't know how far I have to go here. We can go to depth format. Okay. So normally this would be drawing to the back buffer. I'm going to draw to the main target. I'll go gpu.set render target, main target. And then anything that we've drawn on that target, we want to put it on the back buffer. So down here I'll say gpu.set render target null, which puts us back to the back buffer. And then I can draw whatever main target, whatever was rendered on the main target, onto the back buffer by stretching it over the desktop resolution. So we'll do a new sprite.begin and pair. That'll be opaque, meaning we don't need any alpha transparency. All that stuff's been taken care of. We just need the image copied over. So let's draw the main target. Oops, color.white. Now there's one thing that's wrong with this. This is just going to draw it the same size. We want it stretched, so we need a destination rectangle, which would be the upper left-hand corner and bottom right-hand corner of where we want it stretched onto. So if I click up and down here, I can see on the second, or on version 7, it's a texture, a destination rectangle, and a color. So I'll say new rectangle, and I'll say desk width, desk height. Now those don't exist yet. Let's go up here and get those. I'll just add them here, and I'll need to fetch that information from the current state of the display. And this does kind of assume that the user is not going to change their desktop display resolution in the middle of the game. So we'll say desktop width is equal to graphics adapter. It's a little bit different this time because we need to go to the adapter, find out, what is it? Just a second. Okay, it's default adapter, current display mode width. And we'll do the same sort of thing with height. Alright. That should work. We could also create the rectangle ahead of time and just store that instead. So then we can just say desk rect. And this becomes rectangle desk rect. That'll be deskrect.width. This will be deskrect.height. And we know this will be zeroed out because of the way C# works. Alright, let's give that a try. We'll hit F5. That didn't work. Something went wrong. What did we do wrong here? I think we forgot to save it. But to save it and then hit F5. Nope, that wasn't it. Probably a really foolish blunder. Yeah, we're still using this resolution. We're not actually using the desktop resolution at all. So we captured these, but we didn't actually change the resolution that we're using to be the desktop resolution. So let's make sure we do that. So we're in windowed mode, unless you've changed it to full screen mode. And we just like to create a display resolution that matches the current settings. And then we'll stretch our game resolution onto it to match. So we'll hit F5. Should work now. There we go. That works. And if you don't want to see this stuff down here, I actually kind of prefer it. So if something goes wrong with the game, then you can always get out. Apparently some people don't like that. But if something ever did go wrong and it froze, I don't know how easy it is to get out of there. To hide those, we can always go graphics.full is full screen equals true. In which case we wouldn't need this other main target.